This is a review video on the two new types of EQ you can use, the FFT filter and the Parametric EQ. Now, last year I would have, of course, shown you guys filter and EQ, the 10, 20, and 30 band graphic equalizers. This works fine. If you're getting the sounds you like, keep using it, it's fine. But the 30 band EQ, all these center frequencies on each band, they, of course, line up with the interactive frequency chart. So all these bands represent various parts of hearing and how you're going to describe what you're going to hear. So if you wanted to increase definition in the human voices, you'd be increasing the high frequencies up here. But this, quite frankly, works okay, but there's a lot of interaction between bands. You can't always get exactly what you want, and it's time consuming. So there are other ways we can get different sounds. So we go to Effects, Filter and EQ. The first one, the FFT filter. Now this is one of the modules I recommend you actually start with the presets. So you start with the presets and you see how something sounds.
Christmas parties.
And you can just start modifying to your heart's content until you get a sound you're actually looking for.
Togethers with friends and heading out for New Year's Eve. Whatever you're celebrating downtown, make a night of it at the Bostonian Executive Suites. Stay any weekend from now until January.
So that you could be for an alt-rock sound station voice. Or if you're putting something together and you want it to sound like they're actually coming over the telephone. So it sounds like a telephone without actually going through a telephone. All kinds of very creative things you can do here. Also some real basic stuff. One of the things I used to do on all my voice tracks was kill the mic rumble.
No worries. The Bostonian Executive Suites.
Because there's really nothing happening below 100 hertz in human voice. We can go back to the interactive frequency chart. See, male voice only starts about 100 hertz. So there's no real need to have anything below 100 hertz taking up all your audio energy. So on all my tracks, I would go kill the mic rumble just to clean up any extraneous sounds that were there. So this is, some of your basic EQs. And if you like the curve, you can go in and redraw stuff to your heart's content. And it can be very creative. So it's a module I recommend you really play around with. But for most of my EQ work, I would go Effects, Filter and EQ, Parametric Equalizer. Now this can be as simple or as complex as you want because it's made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 equalizers in one little module. So let's go through them what they are. So you have high pass filter starting at the bottom. So high pass filter, you can change the hertz at which it happens, and you can also change how much it rolls off that bottom end. So you can see the high pass filter gets rid of everything below it, so it passes the highs. That's why it's called the high pass filter. And you can do the same thing for kill the mic rumble and just make that start at 100 and have it roll off the bottom. That would work just as well. At the other end, you have the low pass filter. So it's over here, LP, so we can drag it and it does the exact same thing. It gets rid of the highs, so it passes everything below it. So the low pass filter, and you can tune where it shows up in terms of hertz and how far it rolls stuff off as well. So you can have some pretty drastic curves just cleaning stuff up there. Low pass filter, you're probably not going to use a lot. High pass filter, you could probably find reason to use that. The next filters we have are low filters and high filters. And these are really basic, simple filters. They're called shelving filters because as you redraw stuff, it takes everything up and down on a shelf. Pretty simple, right? Great way to use this is with your complementary EQ. So if you wanted to get rid of the lower end by a couple of dB, and then increase the high end a couple of dB. There's your complementary EQ for your voice. So your voice goes up, gets rid of the low end, increases the high end, and then you could just change it really subtly to do the same thing on your music bed. So it goes down the other way. So the lows are more prominent and the highs aren't as prominent. So that's a really good way to get started using the parametric EQ. Next we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the real parametric modules in this EQ. And they're 5 individual filters, and you can move them anywhere you want them in terms of where they are in your EQ graph. All movable, and you can write in, if you wanted to put that at 5,000 hertz, it'll just jump there automatically. Each one of them has a gain, so if I bring 4 up, it's got a positive gain. If I bring 4 down, it's got a negative gain. Each one of them also has a Q or width, and you can adjust this to how your brain works. Q works in reverse. If you have a small Q number, so let's give it 0.4. A small Q actually affects a fairly wide area. You can see how much moving this around, how wide that curve is. So if I change the Q to a huge number, there, 91, you'll see as I bring it up, it affects relatively a much smaller area. So Q works reverse to how you think of it. That's why sometimes it's better to go in terms of width. So width, I want that EQ spike to be only 2 hertz wide, 2 cycles wide. And you can see it comes up really super narrow. Now, that's not very useful, so we'd bring that up and see how wide we would want that to affect things. So you might have that around 200 or 100 hertz, depending on what sound you're trying to get. And these are all movable, all totally adjustable. Of course, one thing to keep track on, if you're putting big, huge EQ changes in where this is boosting 30 dB, you might have to use your master gain to bring that down. There are some presets here. Good places to start. So if you want it to sound like an old-time radio.
Play and stay from just $89 a night. The Bostonian Executive Suites.
Sure, that sounds like a really old radio. A vocal enhancer. So this has got a low pass or high pass filter taking out the lows. The lows are then further dropped just a little bit, and then the highs are really emphasized.
Ottawa's affordable luxury hotel, 341 McLaren between O'Connor and Bank Street.
So again, these will get you started. Acoustic guitar, it's kind of a complementary EQ. It's got a little bit of a dip in the low end and then a slight rise in the high end.
Log on to thebostonian.ca.
But it also brings up a little spike in the upper mid-range. So this is probably an easier EQ to work with because you can make more changes faster and you can see what you've done easier. So if the 96 dB, which is probably a little extreme, makes it hard to see what kind of curve you've drawn, go to a smaller 30 dB curve and then you can really see the difference you've made. So we can totally reset this default, which is flat, 30 dB, and we'll turn off all the individual modules and just make a real simple complementary EQ curve at 120 and 8K. And there you can see, so voice would go up and then we'd reverse that for complementary EQ. Music goes up at the bottom and down at the top. So those two shapes fit together to really emphasize our voice. Parametric EQ, I really strongly recommend you use this. It becomes very creative and it becomes second nature the more you use it.